Hello and welcome to the Rest Hold Wrestling channel with myself, Kieran, and of course Gareth here today. We're going to be talking about tournaments. And the reason why we talk about tournaments is AEW have recently announced a singles tournament. And at the time of recording, they've announced the likes of Ray Phoenix, Kenny Omega, and Jungle Boy. And there's more to be announced. So we're not going to cover that. We'll be covering that in a future video. But that's inspired us to come up with some tournaments of our own. Some of which have been made on the spot just now, some of which have had some more meticulous thought and more an idea. So, first of all, glad to see you, Gareth. Hope you are well.
I'm great.
I'm going to run my idea past you, which I've briefly mentioned to you, and obviously you guys at home are going to briefly hear, and you can tell me if it's terrible or not.
It will be. It will be terrible.
Oh.
My idea is the best.
Okay. So, Gareth has went into a lot of detail in his, so I'm looking forward to his.
Well, it's not necessarily a lot of detail. It's just that there's a specific plan. Basically, it's quite a simple tournament. So, but you'll see when we get to that. What's yours, Kieran?
Well, mine's not simple. Mine is basically plagiarism. And basically, for anyone who's familiar with football, that is soccer football, not American football. I do apologise. You would be familiar with the competition known as the Champions League. What that essentially entails, in terms of the Champions League, like the actual tournament brackets itself, it has very, very different qualifying stages, but what the real meat of it is, the people that really get really excited for, is the point where I believe there are 8 groups of 4. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it 8 groups? Or 12? I'm not too sure.
It's 8, I think.
8?
Yeah.
I went with 8 in my example. But essentially, 8 groups of 4 teams. And in my case, it'll be 8 groups of 4 wrestlers, singles wrestlers. Probably male, most likely, given the pure amount of talent here, and you can utilize tag teams in this, of course, which I think brings about a really interesting dynamic as well, because this I will get onto the draws in a second, but it'll largely be random, so the spectacle of seeing tag teams face one another, I think, is a really particularly interesting one, because we don't get to see that in AEW very much, do we? So you don't really see much of a Luchasaurus versus a Jungle Boy, or Santana versus Ortiz, or something like that. Yeah, yes, we see them together all the time, and sort of stuff. But it's just stuff we haven't seen. It's matches that you don't get to see.
In G1, when you get like the faction leader versus someone lower down his faction or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly.
It always leads to a very interesting dynamic. They always tell a really interesting story around it, and it's good. But it's a way in which they can do that match without having to do some weird blood feud or break them up or anything like that.
Exactly. And so I briefly mentioned draws in my example here. I thought what I'd do to create some incentive, win-loss records. So the first lot of 8 people, they would be the top 8 of the win-loss records.
Yeah.
Pure and simple. So they'd get a guaranteed spot in this division, depending on injuries and stuff, of course. So at least from the time of recording and from plain memory, so you guys like Lance Archer, obviously you're going to include the champions in, because I think it's cool to include champions, because there's a possibility of them losing, and then what you could draw from that is the idea that the person who beats them can have a title shot in the end. That's something that we see with the G1 year in, year out, and it's a really good formula. That I really do like that. But the possibility of champions losing is always an interesting spectacle, nonetheless. So, top 8 guys in that win-loss record, they get a guaranteed pick. They're the first, and it also guarantees that you spread out your top talent throughout the groups as well. You can do that if you wanted to in kayfabe anyway, but it just gives you that little bit of a legitimacy with the idea as to why all the top guys are separated. That's because they were put in an individual, let's call it a tub of, I forgot what they call it, but it's like a draw. And so we're going to call it that. The last 24, however, are a complete random. And you can think of this 24 a little bit like a Royal Rumble in respect to you can just pick out any names at random, and you can essentially, for the Booker's case, Tony Khan's case, it's a thing of they can pick anyone they like. Anyone, whether that be a surprise, whether those be individual members of tag teams, whether it be legitimate singles guys in their own rights. Maybe, all these guys like Will Hobbs, maybe there's a spot for one of the development talent, and he doesn't get a win or anything, but he gets some recognition to his name. He's there. Or, stuff like that. That's always really good. And essentially, from that point forth, you can have a system where, in regards to the exact same as the Champions League, the top two continue forth, and then what you'll eventually have is a loss of 16, because effectively you're cutting the pool of people, the first 32 people, and you can have first versus seconds. So if you are first, you'd want to be there, first of all, for the gratification of being first of your group. That's all well and good. But you'll actually get an advantage because you're facing someone who has struggled in comparison to you. They haven't been as strong within their respective group. Yeah. So there's an advantage. No different to what it is like in that Champions League that we've previously talked about. And then, of course, it's simple from then on out. It's a typical tournament formula. Winner proceeds, go through the quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals, and in the finals, again, I would do a very similar thing to the G1, have a trophy to commemorate that moment as a celebration. If it's a heel, they can really utilize it as a moment of cockiness and bragging rights, all this variety of things. But of course, a title shot at the end of it, something that's meaningful to that competitor, something of progression for that person in particular. Yeah. And that is purely it. It is purely it. It's very much Champions League, but with the added little twist, I think, of including the tag teams, so you can see some interesting matches. Maybe get legends in. Maybe you can get a Billy Gunn in. It's only 3 matches at the end of the day. Space this within a space of a month or two, because at the end of the day, we do see that length of time. And then, of course, you're going to see stories develop through this. Halfway through, when we're in the quarterfinals, semi-final stages, when there's losses, when there's wins, maybe there's a tag team fallout, and then we see a story develop between that tag team, and then they've got 3 to 4 weeks of developing that story to the pay-per-view, or something like that. There's very much, you can do a lot with this. It's very much the foundation for a lot of stories that you can tell. And it's Champions League, but then there's the added little layer as well that people with those win-loss records in the singles, in respective singles, so because you could have women's as well. But in the case of the men's, it gives them a bit more incentive. It guarantees that your top guys, the guys getting those wins, the guys that you've positioned at the top of the company, they're very well spread out and guaranteed in that tournament as well. So it's very simple, typical, but I think something that could definitely work with a little bit of ambition, given it would take a lot of work, I think. But with Dark, with the additional show that they want to continue on with as well, that we're not aware of as of yet of recording, and of course Dynamite itself, that's an awful lot of time, and you can create a lot more incentive to go ahead and watch those matches. Because as someone who's a big fan of AEW right now, I don't watch Dark week in, week out. You know, it would certainly create more incentive. But that's it, man.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where my idea is fairly similar. It's not the same in terms of the structure, but it's one of those things. Everyone loves tournaments, and it's something. I think the thing that works so well with the G1 is that it's every year, and there's always that kind of excitement building to it. Often when WWE will do a tournament, it'll be very random. Like they used to do King of the Ring every year. With its own pay-per-view and stuff, and it was a big deal. I think one time they did just King of the Ring all in one pay-per-view. And, it was... But I can't remember the last time they were doing it regularly, but I think it's been since like 2002 or something. It's just been every 5 years or something like that. I think it was Booker T, and then Wade Barrett, and then there might have been... Did Sheamus win it? Am I just making... Anyway, besides the point, they don't do it very often.
I get the feeling consistency is key. You're trying to go up with.
basically. And so that's the thing that kind of is really good about the G1. Or when you think about other things like the Royal Rumble in WWE, it's always something which is like in the months leading up, it's like, okay, who's going to win the Royal Rumble? And then again, the stakes on that with the winner going to a title match at WrestleMania. That's kind of what makes it. So you kind of need that title shot on the end, as you did allude to earlier. So I do like it. I think the one worry I would have is that it's a lot of matches and it might be too long. It's doable, but like it's the kind of thing where I would want all of those matches to be on Dynamite, and you'd have to spread it out really, really long for that to happen. Or again, once that third hour is there, you could do it on there. I wouldn't want it on Dark purely because it's on YouTube and not everyone is ever going to watch it. If it was on TV, I think at least in that third hour on Dynamite, I think that's good. If it was going to become something like to the level I want it to be, basically, and I think I wouldn't really want this tournament if it wasn't going to be taken as seriously as the G1 kind of thing. But I do like it, and I like how in your one you've kind of got a bit of the G1 kind of style and that the group format and stuff, or the block format as they call it in the G1. Much smaller, obviously, but then you've also got that knockout tournament as well. And all in all, for one wrestler, it's not like if to win it is, will that be 7 matches? So it's not like this unbelievable feat that you can't believe someone would do, but the sheer amount of the fact that everyone's kind of competing, and it would very much feel like, okay, this is the best guy out of the company, maybe besides the champion. It would definitely give it. So I do really like it. I worry how long it would take to actually.
No, you well, absolutely, you are absolutely correct. There's no
it's just
a
thing of like, it's just a thing of like how it would be scheduled, but they could make it work. Like if they do have that third hour on a TV show, that's something where you could fit 3 or 4 matches on, and it could be a pure wrestling show rather than for those month or two, for however long you're doing this tournament for, however long it lasts, and then you could do a couple on Dynamite, but while still having your other kind of stories and feuds going on there as well. So I think it would be possible between pay-per-views, for example. You could do it in like a 3-month gap doing that. But yeah, I think that third hour would pretty much have to be sacrificed purely to that tournament, which wouldn't be a bad thing.
I think personally, I do personally disagree though. I personally, I don't want the third hour. I would personally want it on Dark, and that's my personal like. And my reason, I get your point in sort of maintaining that legitimacy. It's sort of that like must see. If it's going to be must see, it's going to be on their biggest stage. That it's not going to be on their B-level TV show. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to cover a lot of ground within their TV show in the first place. So having a little bit extra, all it means is that the matches on Dark are going to mean more, really.
Yeah.
And
they're still going to be like, you wouldn't say you had Pac and Kenny Omega meeting in the group stages for whatever reason. That would be on Dynamite. Whereas if you had, I don't know, a Jungle Boy versus someone much lower down, like a Will Hobbs, for example, someone like that at the moment, that's a match you could see on Dark anyway now, and it just means it have a bit more to it. You could do it that way. I
think you perfectly valid point, but I think maybe the inclusion of a time limit, maybe a 20-minute time limit, something like that. You never really reach that draw because, well, you can if it fits with what you want to create within the draw. Maybe you could have an instance where second and third place have the same amount of points, but because second place won against third place, they get that edge up, and that creates something.
They do that on the G1. Like, there's been so many times where there'll be like 3 people drawn at the top, but the one who wins the group has beaten the other 2 or whatever. So
exactly, and I think maybe like a 20-minute time limit. I mean, you could easily have say 4 matches there, or maybe 3, and say 3 or 4, maybe 2 matches of each of respective groups. So you could have Group A 2 matches of that, Group B you could have 2 matches of that, and then you could have equal same on Dark. Again, it's
Yeah.
a long ordeal. But the thing is, it's a long ordeal getting to the pay-per-views themselves.
Yeah.
So and but I do think you're right on the respect in regards to time as well. Maybe that's a thing of cutting it down. Maybe it's not so much as a 32. Maybe it's a thing of cutting it down to a 16, or something like
Well,
something a bit more realistic considering the times.
this is the thing. I'll go on to my idea now because it kind of links into what you said in terms of cutting it down. Something I thought. I thought this ages ago, and it just so happened that you kind of pitched this idea of a video, and I thought, oh, I've got this idea, so I'll use that. But basically, MGF's ring that
Yeah,
he's got. So that was one in the Dynamite Dozen.
yeah,
And what that was like a battle royal, and then the two who were left standing then had a match. And I just thought that was a bit naff. It was fine for creating a match, but I thought it was a bit meh. So I was thinking basically a tournament of 12, that the winner will get that ring and then a title shot. So that ring effectively is like something that they can carry around, even if they don't win the title, they can carry it around as basically the best. And the people who will compete in this tournament would be like the best. So it would be like the top 12 ranked throughout the year. So basically whoever has got the best. Although I don't know how much you want to stick to that necessarily, because you might be in a place in the future where AEW have a deal with New Japan, or they're working with another company for whatever reason, and maybe it's Ring of Honor, and maybe you want to showcase a couple of their guys in the tournament, kind of how New Japan sometimes does with Ring of Honor guys. And so maybe it's not quite as fixed as that, but at least you want this to be the strongest of the strong. So if they say AEW were working with New Japan, you might throw an Okada in there. You might throw someone from there in there. Maybe you could have spots for wild cards. So you could be the top 6 ranked, I guess, because that would be half. And then the other 6 would be random, kind of similar to yours. Haven't quite thought completely about that. But yeah, you want it to be basically the best of the best. And it's 12 people. So it feels really kind of special if you are in there.
yeah. Nope, that's a very valid point.
And yeah, so basically then it would be 2 blocks of 6, and it would basically be kind of G1-esque up until the point of, well, obviously you finish those 2 blocks, and then I was thinking the top 2 would then go into from each would go into a semi-final, again similar to yours, first versus second in both, and then go to a final. So it's basically just a shorter version of yours, basically, with bigger group stages. And I think the thing, because when you said like 8 groups of 4, this was one of the things I thought about was in the cruiserweight tournament thing that WWE did, they did groups of 4, and I just thought there wasn't, maybe because you only get 3 matches. I would have liked to have seen more from the other guys who didn't get to go through. And more of a thing, because guys like Tony Nese were basically there to take losses, and again, when you look at the G1, even the guys lower down the card, sometimes they'll have like a story throughout that tournament. It's just easier to do when you've got a few more matches. So this would be 5 rather than 3. So it's only a small jump, I think, enough basically. But yeah, everything else I think is pretty similar to yours. Like the winner would get instead of a trophy, it would be that little ring because they've already got it. I call it the Dynamite Dozen because they've already got that branding and stuff, and it already kind of fits in. I think it would be easier to fit onto their shows. I think you could do it all within a month rather than, especially if you do have that 3rd hour of TV, for sure you could do it within a month, maybe like a month and a half. And then the final being at the pay-per-view, with them building to a title match at the next pay-per-view. That's what I'd like to see. Again, Tony Khan said that the Dynamite Dozen ring is something that's going to be defended every year. And my thought of kind of this idea was, I really don't care to see that little battle royal thing again, and trying to think of a way where you could do it and kind of upgrade it. So that was my idea, really.
Yeah. I think so, you mentioned a point there that I want to sort of, I don't know, just debate, not debate as such, but give my answer to. You said people who, at the end of the day, people down lower down in the groups and such, they will be able to get their story in essentially. They'll be just chiming in to have a couple of losses, and that would be it. I think the kind of idea with it as a whole is the fact that the people, like, you are going to have people like tag teams and such, because they've got a huge tag team roster. You can really chime in there, and they're gonna be losing. They're gonna on by themselves. A good few of them are going to be losing by themselves. For me, it's just more of a thing of the scale of it all. The scale, like, it's like, I really do like yours. It does have more. It's more realistic.
Yeah.
Considering their current scheduling, but like, I think I'd be more. As much as I really do like yours, I think I'd something scaled
You can call
bigger.
it shit, right?
No, just seriously, it's really good. I do like it. At the end of the day, it is like a G1. It's a cut down G1, which is a very sensible direction to go in. But I just think I'd love to see something on a grander scale, because the thing is with the G1 that we see, it's like 3 nights every week on average, and that's 5 matches there dedicated, to each night. I think it is anyway. Yeah, it is. And so what you run? Hang on a minute.
Effectively doing like 15, 20 matches a week, aren't you? In the G1.
Yeah, that's why they call it the most intense tournament. Blah 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 blah. So, but like, I think that putting that into AEW's context, like, it would be longer, because of course they can't do those 3 nights in a week sort of thing. So that does elongate it quite a fair amount, considering you want to get the female division stuff in as well, so the women's division stuff in as well, and a variety of other things. So there is the time constraints there as well. But yeah, I just think, from a purely selfish point of view, I just would love to see something on a grander scale, something that just dominates an entire portion of their calendar that people cannot wait to participate within. I
completely agree. Like, I'd probably rather see something like your idea, perhaps with like slightly larger groups or something, or maybe it's like 5 in a group, and then.
Or maybe you cut it down from 8, and maybe you have 4 groups of 6 or something. I don't know.
4 of 8.
Yeah.
And then, other than that, 7 matches, and again, you're looking at schedule issues. But ultimately, it depends. Like.
Yeah. Oh no, it is. It's
mostly on those kinds of things. But I would like. And I like the idea of having it split between kind of a block thing, because mine basically goes from blocks, semi-finals, and then a final, and it's not really 2 tournaments. The great thing about the Champions League, for example, is it's almost like it's literally before the winter break, or the winter. It's not a break because they keep playing, but before like the January transfer window and stuff, you have the group stages, and that's kind of where you set up the bigger tournament. And I kind of like that, and it's the idea of having. Okay, you've just gone through this group stage, you've finished above all those other people, but now you've got to go through the actual knockout tournament itself, where every match is must win, like, otherwise you're out. I do like that as well. I kind of like to find a happy medium between our two, I think.
I was going to say the exact same thing. And with that, I say let's leave this video and leave it open-ended for, if you are watching, anyone who is watching this, let us know your thoughts of any tournament ideas that you have, what you think of ours, how could they be better? I mean, are they utterly crap? Let us know, honestly. Put us on our place, essentially. So thank you very much for joining us here on our little escapade, a little journey in talking about some tournaments that we'd like to see AEW. There's no question about it that we're excited to see what AEW does with this tournament going ahead with Jungle Boy Phoenix and Omega, where they get a future AEW World Title match. There's no, there's going to be a lot.
A little bit too short.
It does. It is a little. I'm fine with it. I'm completely cool. Yeah. I'm gonna really enjoy it. For sure. But I think what we can both agree on, definitely, is they need that portion. WWE has January to April, that period of time, that road to WrestleMania, even though they have shit like Roadblock pay-per-views and stuff. Like the Elimination Chamber stuff, like even though that match can sometimes be a bit rough, it's not always the best matches.
Yeah.
But like the journey for that, it completely, despite it being the same, it's not like the energy levels, everything. There's a direction, and I think
Yeah.
that's WWE has that. New Japan, they have their G1. It just completely
Yeah.
dominates everything, and I think AEW needs that somewhere in their calendar.
They
So
also need these things like, especially if you're going to be kind of sports based and stuff. I think you need like a thing like a rather than just random tournaments whenever it's kind of convenient. You need something like which is every year, and
absolutely,
that builds history. Like you think about like the way people talk about past Royal Rumble winners, or they'll talk about even Money in the Bank, even though it's not a tournament, it's a fixed competitive match every year, which is one thing. And like I think you need those kind of things, and I think
absolutely.
AEW they could have like a casino ladder match as a weekly that would be ridiculous as an annual thing. As they did at this Double or Nothing, and then this could be something which holds up. I'd like to see them stick with this for pay per view thing, but always for pay per view schedule, but always have that kind of like way to define your month, basically, or the months leading up.
Absolutely.
In order to that, and this tournament could be for one of those ladder match kind of qualifiers. I think would be a good thing as well. Just basically
Yeah.
trying to get those trying to find a way to get more competitive matches in there. I think it would be a really good thing.
They've got their first year in the bag, nearly. I think I want to say we're very close to that point now.
2 weeks, yeah.
So they got their first year in the bag, absolutely nailed that. I think what we'd really love to see now is really decently big AEW fans, someone who we've watched every single week from day one. I think one thing that we'd like to see develop upon for the second year and years ahead is like a calendar, an AEW calendar. That's all. And with that, thank you very much for joining us. You can see us every Wednesday for AEW Dynamite. If you watch AEW, we live stream our watch along over on our Twitch channel, which is linked in the description below. If you're interested at all, by all means follow us, or follow us on Twitter and we'll inform you. All that sort of stuff. We chat all sorts of crap on Twitter. It'd be great for you to put us in our place as well. So thank you very much for joining us, and we hope to see you soon. Take care.
Goodbye.